today we're going to be making this adorable adult small-sized beanie. And for this beanie, I am working with some size 4 medium weight wool yarn, and this is by the Cascade yarns, and it's roughly 220 yards. And I'm also going to be using a size H or 8 or 5mm crochet hook. And we're going to begin by attaching the yarn to our crochet hook with a magic circle. Then we want to chain 3 and then place 11 double crochets inside of our magic circle. And if you're unfamiliar with any of the stitches used in this pattern, then check the links in the description for my stitch tutorial videos. And once you have your 11 double crochets in your magic circle, then we're going to pull on our tail to tighten the gap in the magic circle. And from here, we want to skip our chain 3 altogether and then place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. And for our next row, we are going to be working 2 back post stitches in each stitch in our row going all the way around. We're going to begin right here in this current stitch, so I'll show you how to do that. We're going to begin with a yarn over, and then I want you to insert your crochet hook between your chain 3 and this first double crochet, and I want you to insert it from behind like this. Then we're going to insert our crochet hook between our first and second double crochet. So you should have captured the stem or post of that first double crochet in your crochet hook. From here we're going to yarn over and pull up through our post, and then yarn over and drop 2 loops at a time until we complete our stitch. And from here, we need to add an additional back post stitch by repeating those steps again so that we have our 2 back post stitches around our first double crochet. And from here, we're just going to work around our second double crochet to place our next 2 back post stitches in the same way we did our first. So again, we're just going to place 2 back post stitches around each stitch in our row, and we are going to work around the chain 3 at the end of our row, so I'll show you how to do that when we get there. And you should have a total of 24 back post stitches. And when you get to the end of your row, I want you to work around your chain 3 the exact same way that you worked around your double crochets, just capturing the post of your chain 3 in your crochet hook. And we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first back post stitch to join. And for our next row, we're going to be placing bead stitches. So we're going to begin with a chain 2. Then we want to look back in our last back post stitch right here. And make sure you're not accidentally looking at your little slip stitch, but your last back post stitch. And basically, we're just going to yarn over and pull up through 3 times. So go ahead and yarn over and then insert your crochet hook in that stitch and yarn over and pull up through. Then we want to yarn over and insert our crochet hook again in that stitch and yarn over and pull back up through. We're going to repeat that one more time. From here, we're going to yarn over and drop all of those loops and then place a chain 1 to complete our bead stitch. And for our subsequent bead stitches, we're going to skip our next stitch and then place a double crochet in the following stitch. Then working in that skipped stitch, we want to yarn over and pull up through 3 times, just like we did before. And you want to keep these nice and loose. Then we're going to yarn over and drop all the loops and chain 1 to complete our bead stitch. So go ahead and repeat this, going all the way around your row for a total of 12 bead stitches. And at the end of your row, we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first bead stitch like this. And for our next row, we're going to chain 3 again, and working right back into that same stitch where we just placed our slip stitch, we're going to add a double crochet. And we're going to place 2 double crochets in our next stitch. And the pattern for the rest of the row is going to be to place 1 double crochet in our next 2 stitches and then 2 double crochets in our third. And we're just going to repeat that going around our row, and we should have a total of 48 double crochets when we're done. And at the end of your row, you're going to skip your chain 3 and then place a slip stitch in the top of your first double crochet. And for our next row, we're going to place 1 back post stitch around our first 3 double crochets, and then we're going to place 2 back post stitches around our 4th double crochet. And we're going to repeat this pattern going around our row for a total of 60 back post stitches. And don't forget to work around your chain 3 at the end of your row. And we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first back post stitch to join. And we're going to place another row of bead stitches, but this one's going to be a little different than the last. We're going to begin with a chain 2, and we're going to place our bead stitch back in our last back post stitch, just like we did before. But for our next bead stitch, I want you to skip 2 stitches rather than 1, and we're going to place a double crochet in our 3rd stitch there. Then I want you to place your bead stitch in that first skipped stitch. And in our next bead, we're only going to skip 1 stitch before we place our double crochet. So in this row, we are basically going to alternate between skipping 2 stitches before we place our double crochet and 1 stitch before we place our double crochet. And we're just going to alternate that going all the way around our row, and we should have a total of 24 bead stitches. And at the end of your row, you're just going to place a slip stitch in the top of your first bead, just like before. And for our next row, we're going to chain 3 and then place a double crochet back in that same stitch where we just worked. And for this row, we're just going to place 1 double crochet in each stitch in our row, going all the way around for a total of 72 double crochets. And at the end of your row, you're going to skip your chain 3 and then place a slip stitch in the top of your first double crochet. And the pattern for this row is just to place 1 back post stitch in each stitch in our row, going all the way around and including that chain 3 at the end of our row. And at the end of your row, you are again going to place a slip stitch in the top of your first back post stitch. And we're going to place a row of bead stitches beginning with a chain 2. And for this row, we're going to skip our last back post stitch and place a bead stitch in that second to last back post stitch right there. And for the subsequent bead stitches in our row, we're going to skip our next 2 stitches and then place a double crochet in our 3rd stitch. Then we're going to place a bead stitch in that first skipped stitch. And we just want to repeat that pattern going all the way around our row for a total of 24 bead stitches. And at the end of your row, you're just going to place a slip stitch in the top of your first bead stitch, just like we've been doing. And from here, we're just going to repeat our last 3 rows to build the body of our beanie. And I repeated my 3 rows until I had a total of 7 rows of my bead stitch. And I am making this for my mom who has a very small head. So if you're making this for someone with a normal sized head, you might want to add some additional rows here, maybe another section of those 3 rows. And at the end of your last row, we're going to insert our crochet hook in the top of that first bead. Then we're going to cut our yarn. And we're going to pull this little tail through all the loops on our crochet hook, just like this, to tie it off. And I am going to hide the tail up the inside of my beanie. And I added a faux fur pom-pom to the top of this, and I will link to my DIY faux fur pom-pom in the description. Thank you so much for working with me, and I hope you have a wonderful, awesome day.